Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, one and all. It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan tonight. In my big opinion, as the police give in to gender madness, let's be clear, there is no such thing as a female rapist. My Mark Meets guest has gained thousands of fans online by travelling to the most dangerous places in the world. He's even met the Taliban and lived to tell the story. He's risked life and limb to pursue his crazy adventures, and he joins us before the end of the hour. In the big story, we'll bring you the latest on the tragic scenes of violence playing out in Israel, with voices in the field and top analysis closer to home. In my Take at 10, the Irish Premier Leo Varadkar says Britain is disengaging from the world. Well, I'll be putting this EU stooge right and disengaging from his absolute nonsense. Look, it's going to be a hard night. There are some awful stories to report on, but we'll usually bring you what we can in terms of the mix on Mark Dolan tonight. The big opinion, big debate, and a touch of entertainment along the way. Lots to get through. I'll be dealing with the woke police straight after the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. And our top story, breaking in the last hour, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will take mighty vengeance against the terrorist organisation Hamas after more than 200 Israelis were killed and 1,100 injured due to a surprise attack. Nearly 200 Palestinians have also subsequently died after Hamas fired thousands of rockets and gunmen crossed the border. Local news reported Israeli civilians in border towns barricading themselves in their homes and pleading for help. Hamas says Israeli captives are being held in secure places, including tunnels. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says the UK will not tolerate terrorism.
The UK completely condemns these terrorist acts against Israel, and we support Israel's right to self-defence. And of course, we will be working closely with the Israeli government. We're already in contact with them and will continue to do so, both to protect British nationals in Israel and to try and bring peace as quickly as possible.
Dozens of Hamas terrorists have been stopped by Israeli naval personnel. That's according to Israel's defence forces. A warning for those watching on TV, you may find the following footage distressing. Earlier this morning, the IDF pursued dozens of terrorists along the southern maritime area as they tried to enter Israeli territory via the water. Soldiers opened fire on the militants, successfully destroying 4 vessels. Hamas terrorists were also stopped as they tried to cross into Israel along the southern border. Well, back here, a significant quantity of what is thought to be cocaine has been discovered off the coast of Dorset and Hampshire. The National Crime Agency is investigating after a fisherman discovered holdalls containing hundreds of kilos of powder in the sea off St Aldhelm's Point and Durdle Door in Purbeck. More washed up on a beach on the Isle of Wight. The NCA says the Class A drugs would have originated in South America. They're urging the public to report any similar packages to their local police force. Well, as we've been hearing, 260 suspected rapists have been labelled as females by police over the last 4 years. That's according to data from the Crown Prosecution Service, which was obtained by the Daily Telegraph. The classification comes despite the Home Secretary urging police not to label rape suspects as women, as by law it can only be committed by a biological male. The figures show a further 209 suspects were recorded with sex unknown. And finally, the British film director Terence Davies has died aged 77 following a short illness. He came to prominence in the 1970s and 80s with a string of successful films, including Distant Voices and Still Lives. Much of his work was drawn from his own experiences growing up as a working-class boy in Liverpool. More recently, he wrote and directed A Quiet Passion, in which he dramatised the life of American poet Emily Dickinson. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now let's get back to Mark.
My thanks to Ray Addison, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. In my big opinion, as the police give in to gender madness, as you've just heard from Ray's bulletin there, let's be clear, there is no such thing as a female rapist. In the big story, we'll bring you the latest on the tragic scenes of violence playing out in Israel, with voices in the field and top analysis closer to home. My Mark Meets guest has gained thousands of fans online by travelling to the most dangerous places in the world. He's even met the Taliban and lived to tell the story. He joins us before the end of the hour. In my Take at 10, you won't believe the cheek of this. The Irish Premier, Leo Varadkar, says that Britain is disengaging from the world. I'll be putting this EU stooge right and disengaging from his absolute nonsense. As Donald Trump roars ahead of Joe Biden in the polls, is a Trump presidency in a year's time now inevitable? Plus, Prince Andrew will not budge from the Royal Lodge, escalating his Cold War with King Charles. We'll get reaction from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Plus, we got tomorrow's front pages at 10:30, that is the Sunday papers, with three top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Tonight, broadcaster and journalist Emma Wolf, a brand new star on Mark Dolan tonight, entrepreneur and former Brexit Party candidate Mike Green, and a good friend of the show, podcaster and commentator Lewis Oakley. Tonight, I'll be asking the pundits as she kicks off Labour conference, is Angela Rayner right that misogyny or extreme sexism should be a hate crime? Plus, we'll be hearing about the woman who gave up looking for Mr. Right and instead spent £10,000 marrying herself. Plus, the most important part of the show, your emails. They come straight to my laptop, mark@gbnews.com. So, a big 2 hours to come, lots to get through. We start with my big opinion. These are dark times indeed. The Telegraph report that police have wrongly labelled hundreds of suspected rapists as women, despite the Home Secretary saying they should not do so. Figures obtained under the Freedom of Information Act show for the first time the scale of police adopting the self-declared gender of alleged sex attackers. Over the last 4 years, police forces have referred 260 females, which is biological men identifying as women, to the Crown Prosecution Service to consider a charge of rape. A further 209 suspects have been recorded as being of an unknown sex, in other words, non-binary, whatever that means. By law, rape can only be committed by a biological male. But still, these monsters are being labelled woman by PC Plod. This is progress, is it? Where to start? Well, I'd start with the culture of the police, who are now so schooled in the politically correct scripture, they're comfortable categorising male rapists as women. This isn't a mistake or an oversight or an overzealous woke officer gone rogue. This appears to be policy. To call a biological male accused of the rape of a woman is a profound insult to all women. It's a slander on their name. It is a libel on half of the population. And can you imagine how the alleged female victims feel, being told by the police, who were there to protect them, that they were assaulted by a lady? Just let that one sink in for a moment. Rape is one of the worst crimes imaginable. So to gaslight the victims and tell them they've been attacked by a woman is bizarre, dystopian, and frankly, wicked. But that's the extreme end of woke for you. With its turning upside down of reality, its denial of human biology, and its twisted ideology in regards to race relations and much beyond, it is touched with evil. How ironic, therefore, that these people are often characterised as the good guys, the be kind crowd. You call this out for what it is and you're a bad person. Right wing or something. Just shut up and go away. This nonsense doesn't even comply with the law. The Home Secretary herself said earlier this year that in no instance was it biologically or legally right for a rapist to be described as she. All of this comes as a result of policies which allow people to decide which gender they are. Criminals are now gaming the system, like Isla Bryson in Scotland, a double rapist, a fully intact male, accommodated in a women's prison. You couldn't make it up. That story was instrumental in bringing down Nicola Sturgeon. By cancelling women, the former Scottish First Minister cancelled herself. Let me tell you, the public are sick and tired of this woke BS, and their anger will be felt at the ballot box. These words from the Prime Minister this week were welcome and arguably the highlight of his speech. Take a listen to Sunak in action on Wednesday.
We shouldn't get bullied into believing that people can be any sex they want to be. They can't. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's just common sense.
And it's also common sense to say that rapists are not women. They never have been and they never will be. Welcome to the clown world of 2023, where you have to point that out. What a time to be alive. Your reaction to the news that scores of biological men who identify as female have been logged as women rapists by the police. Mark at GBNews.com. Let's get reaction now from my top pundits. Broadcaster and journalist Emma Wolfe, entrepreneur and former Brexit Party candidate, a brand new star on Mark Dolan tonight, Mike Green, and podcaster and commentator Lewis Oakley. Can I start with you, because Emma, you are a woman, biological female. Your reaction to this story?
Oh, it's utterly ludicrous to categorise rapists as women. It's offensive, as you say. It's offensive to women. I can't even imagine how the female victims of these rapists must feel. It's gaslighting. It's evil. Everything you said. It's twisted ideology, and it's utterly wrong.
Indeed, and it's worrying that this is happening on quite a large scale within the police. This is not just one individual that's gone rogue by the looks of it. It appears to be cultural.
It appears to be cultural, and I think this goes to the heart of what's wrong with our police force at the moment. When we have 15-year-olds being stabbed on their way to school, we have serious crime going on out there. The police have actually taken their eye off the ball. They have been focusing on ludicrous developments like this, whereby you accept a criminal's assessment of themselves as a woman when they are a man, when they have done the most violent thing you can do to a woman, which is rape, I would say, apart from obviously killing them, murder, that they are accepting that. And you go back to the victims and how they must feel.
Indeed, worrying, isn't it, Mike, that the police appear to be ignoring instructions from the Home Secretary?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'd love to get the people who allow these changes in law for any aggressor or rapist to self-declare. You know, I don't mind what people's choices are in terms of gender, but to me, if they were born a male and they're still biologically a male, they've had no transition, if they commit any act against a woman, I think they should lose any right to continue that transition. And I'd love to see the people who are changing these laws in front of people who've been raped and make them realise what it's like to allow that the rapist to treat themselves like some kind of victim, as if they need some kind of special treatment. Once they commit this abhorrent crime, they lose all their right to have any choice in their own in how they're treated in our system. It's just appalling. I've got a 21 and a 24-year-old daughter, and I can tell you now, it loses my faith in the police, that they're mucking around. They're becoming tea stewards for climate activists. They're not responding to burglary and shoplifting that's killing many retail businesses. But here they are mucking around with allowing real aggressors to decide what they want to be known as and seen as.
Lewis, I wonder whether this story brings the reputation of the police into disrepute, particularly in relation to the heinous crime of rape.
Yeah, I think that there's some truth to that, and I would echo what the other pundits have said about how horrific rape is and how we need to tackle it. I do think, though, that this is one of those alarmist stories around gender and trans that is not exactly accurate, because we know that we've got new legislation coming in that is basically saying, look, if you are a trans woman and you have committed a sexual offence, or if you have a penis, you're going to a male jail. And the majority of trans women are in male jails already. So this is already happening. It's not that we woke up today and suddenly thought about it. So I do take a bit of issue with how this is kind of riled up as like an anti-trans thing, or at least that we're mad and we're allowing people to gain the...
Said we're anti-rapist. In fact, we both said that we specifically are not anti-trans.
Oh, no, I'm not calling anyone here anti-trans.
If you decide, to change your name and your pronouns, good luck to you. It's a free world, especially if you're a grown adult. But I wonder whether, yes, this is a small number of cases, but... If we don't call this out, then there will be more cases like this, and that's the point. That's why we have to draw attention to it.
Well, I think, to your point, what I'm saying is, in legislation, like, this shouldn't be happening, so it is about the police that are enforcing it, and it's not helpful to trans people or other LGBT people like me when they are not enforcing the law, because then it reflects badly on everyone else.
I think it reflects badly on...
I see that, but then I do think, that this situation, prison is not a good system for stamping this out altogether, because you still have men that are raped in men's prisons, you still have women that are raped in women's prisons, so I do think the whole thing needs to be looked at, and that legal definition of rape as well, because women, although not as common obviously, but women can rape men too.
There you go. Well, look, what is your thought on this, Mark, at gbnews.com? Coming up next in the big story, we'll bring you the latest on the tragic scenes of violence playing out in Israel, with voices in the field and top analysis closer to home. That's next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Well, it has transpired that the police have been logging alleged rapists as women, even though legally that's not possible, and they are biological men. I think this is an example of woke policing gone mad. It's the topic of my big opinion, which Harvey is currently crafting into a video which will be available on Twitter shortly at GB News. How about this from Clinton? Mark, you are a complete and utter retard, says Clinton. Strong words there. One example would be Rose West, who abused little boys, along with her husband, who abused them as well. Female paedophiles do exist. James says, Mark, fire the police who labelled these people as female. Lose pension rights. Lee says, as much as I do not agree with a lot of Rishi has to say these days, one thing I do agree with is a man is a man, a woman is a woman. Gender identity has gone way too far lately. What the police have done is wrong, in my opinion. And, Alan, the College of Policing is at the core of so much of this utter nonsense. Now, apologies if you did not appreciate Clinton's language there in regards to his email. Listen, it is time now for the big story, and Israel has suffered an unexpected and devastating attack from the militant Palestinian group Hamas. Eyewitnesses say the scale of what's been happening is unprecedented. Hamas breached the wire that separates Gaza from Israel in multiple places in the most serious cross-border attack Israel has faced in more than a generation. At least 100 people in Israel have been confirmed as killed, with hundreds of others being treated in hospitals. Meanwhile, nearly 200 people have been killed in retaliatory Israeli strikes in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said we are at war. Meanwhile, Hamas commander Mohammed Deif says the group has decided to say that enough is enough. Meanwhile, dozens of Israelis are believed to have been captured by Palestinian militants. Well, let's head straight to Israel now. Let's get reaction from journalist Emily Schrader, correspondent India Naftali, and journalist Hanania Naftali. And can I start with you, India? What's the latest from where you are?
Well, just a few minutes ago, there were several rocket barrages coming into Tel Aviv. So I think all of us here in the interview were running into the shelters, families. The rocket barrages have since stopped, but the operations down in the south still continue.
Yes, and Hanania, it seems that the security forces did not expect this attack in any way. It was very much a surprise.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with you, but I think that the core of the story here is that, we Israelis and British people have one thing in common, and is that we love life. And for us here in Israel, being 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, thinking that there were people, our age, that were kidnapped, and they're now hostages inside the Gaza Strip, people that were murdered only because they are Jews living in Israel. And that's something that really breaks our hearts here in Israel, on top of having to run to the bomb shelter. But I think that I would conclude this and say that the Israeli resilience is strong, and we do see unity here among all these things that we are witnessing.
Well, we're also joined by journalist Emily Schrader. And Emily, you recorded some footage yourself earlier today. Let's take a look.
Oh my God.
Where is it? Wow, it's
So, Emily, can you just tell me what the mood is in Israel? Clearly, people are worried, people are afraid.
Well, of course. I mean, I think this is probably one of the darkest days in all of Israel's history. So the mood is pretty dismal, understandably so. This footage that you showed was actually less than a block from my house. The rocket barrage that India actually mentioned was the rocket barrage that ended up hitting right next to me. So the whole ground shook. When I went outside, even on the balcony where I took that in the minutes after the attack, the whole street, the whole neighborhood smelled like gunpowder. There's shrapnel all over the street. So it's a very scary reality. And I think that even more disturbing is what's happening in the south. You know, we are having rocket barrages, and that's terrifying, but I can only imagine what the residents at the Gaza border have been experiencing today. And you mentioned that the casualties are 100. It's actually now been confirmed that it's over 250 and over 1,500 injuries. So it will probably be updated further, unfortunately. So we're dealing with a really, really tragic and devastating situation. But as Hananya said, I do think that the people of Israel, from right to left, in situations like this, we are completely united, including the Arab Israelis, including Jewish Israelis, religious, non-religious. And this is a time for us to come together and take a united stand together with allies like the UK against terrorist organizations like Hamas. And I also have to add one more thing that's very important. And that is that this attack was not just orchestrated by Hamas. It was orchestrated with the funding, direction, and training of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which has been talking about invading and destroying Israel for decades now. Just a few days ago, the leaders of Hamas were meeting with the Ayatollah of Iran himself. So it's no coincidence that this issue is coming up now. And this is something that Israel and the entire world, quite frankly, needs to take incredibly seriously and take action on, because Israel is just the front line of defense. And the Islamic Republic of Iran has been very clear about what their agenda is when it comes to Europe and when it comes to the United States as well.
Indeed, of course, we can't confirm that link to Iran, but that is something that many have speculated may well be the case. India, your reaction to the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying this is war, is he right?
I mean, absolutely, and it was fully called for. I mean, such an attack, especially on civilians, any nation, any sovereign nation would also declare war, and Israel has every right to. You know, the Palestinian media has been arguing against this clearly, but now we've seen the face of Hamas. I think the international media has turned a blind eye for so long, and now we're finally seeing world leaders and of the likes speaking out against it on social media, something we haven't seen before in previous wars and operations.
Hananya, if it is a war, how long do you think it will be?
Well, we have seen that the Prime Minister and the heads of the Israeli state, they warned that it is going to last for days and it's going to be tough next 2 days. But I really do want to point out that you see exactly the difference between Israel and Hamas, because the terror organization Hamas, as soon as they infiltrated Israel, as you have mentioned, they ran straight for Israeli homes. They went straight to drag citizens, civilians, kidnap them, and take them back to the Gaza Strip. So it really shows you that who we are dealing with here. Israel targets terrorists, while Hamas is targeting civilians. And I do want to express our gratitude to the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and as well as the Foreign Secretary, that they have expressed solidarity with the people of Israel. It doesn't land on empty ears. So we are appreciative of that.
Well, indeed, and I extend those thoughts myself. Last but not least, Emily, can I just talk to you about some commentators online and in social media who have characterized Hamas as freedom fighters and that this attack is about avenging crimes meted upon the Palestinian people by Israel. Your reaction to that sort of commentary?
I think it's absolutely appalling, and that there should never be any excuse ever for the types of things that we've seen today from these Palestinian terrorists. There really is no other term for them, not even militants. They are terrorists. That is their intent and their purpose, and that is what they are proving. Not only, Hanan is completely correct in his assessment, not only were they targeting civilians, but if you looked at the Palestinian, the Arabic Palestinian social media channels, what they were uploading wasn't targeting military bases or carrying out effective strategic military operations in order to overtake territory. What they were posting was dragging dead bodies of Israeli civilians through the streets. What they were sharing was videos of children, in some cases, being kidnapped from their homes. That is not an organization that seeks to create an effective or a functioning state. That is a terrorist organization that seeks nothing other than destruction. And quite frankly, they're bringing destruction upon their own people as well. Hamas bears full responsibility for every single casualty on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side as well, because there is no reason whatsoever that the Palestinian people should be in this situation either. And that is because of Hamas and, of course, their ties to the Iranian regime.
Devastating and tragic scenes in Israel. My thanks to Emily Schrader, India Naftali and Hananya Naftali. A devastating story and an awful one to cover, but your reaction to what's happening there and the reaction of the people that we've just spoken to, Mark at gbnews.com. Coming up with the pundits tonight, as she kicks off Labour Party conference, is Angela Rayner right to say that misogyny should be a hate crime? Plus, we'll be hearing about the woman who gave up looking for Mr. Right and instead spent £10,000 marrying herself. Is that a good idea? Plus, we've been asking a very, very important People's Poll. I'll bring you that shortly. The details of the People's Poll to come, because it is all about opinion. This show is the home of diverse opinion. Lots to get through. I'll see you in 2.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well done to producer Dominique for organising those interviews in Israel, and we will return to that story at 10:30 with the papers and the editor of the Jewish Chronicle. Now, in the course of today, we've been asking, should King Charles kick disgraced Prince Andrew out of his royal mansion? Well, the results are in. 69.1% say yes, he should be booted out, whilst 30.9% say no. We'll pick up that conversation with the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield, in the next hour. Now, reacting to the day's big stories, we have tonight's pundit, broadcaster and journalist Emma Wolfe, entrepreneur and former Brexit Party candidate, a brand new voice on Mark Dolan tonight, Mike Green, and top podcaster and political commentator Lewis Oakley, very fetching in his check blazer. Bit of Saturday night style. We need a bit of that. Now, as the Labour Party conference gets underway this weekend, we heard from Deputy Leader Angela Rayner at the Labour Women's Conference in Liverpool. Let's take a listen to what she said.
Next Labour government will amend the Equalities Act to introduce a legal duty for employers to take all reasonable steps to stop sexual harassment before it starts. But that's not all. We will make misogyny a hate crime.
Well, that's the kicker. So is Angela Rayner right to say that misogyny should be a hate crime? What do we think? Let's ask Lewis, your reaction to this.
Well, it's interesting because when you basically change something to be a hate crime, you're not sort of making anything else criminal. You're just saying that it is a hate crime. So I've looked at this from kind of the LGBT side, but what it basically is just that it is then recorded as a hate crime, and so then you can differentiate. So basically, if a crazy person were to attack a woman in the street, you would look at, well, why did they attack them? And it would, if it's because he hates women, then that's recorded as a hate crime. If it's he was just out to attack anyone and she was just walking by, then it wouldn't be recorded. And what the idea behind it is that basically we can start to get a list of, like, well, what is causing people to attack women from that kind of misogynistic point of view, and then figure out ways to fix it. So it is a logical idea. It's not criminalising anything that's not already criminalised.
Could it be an aggravating factor in a court of law, do you think?
Possibly. I mean, anything could happen. I kind of think that this is probably the right move, but, you know, it definitely could happen in a court of law.
Well, I guess, Mike, that making misogyny or extreme sexism a hate crime sends the right message.
Well, you know, do I agree with any hate crime? No. Is misogyny good? No. But if you look at the definition of it, it's the hatred of, the contempt for, or the prejudice towards women, OK? And yet, if you'd have seen the 30 seconds or 1 minute before that clip you just showed, she showed hatred, prejudice and contempt for anyone who grew up in a well-to-do family, anyone who went to a private school. The hatred was venomous. And so, you know, you could say she had
previously described Conservatives as scum.
Well, exactly. So if we're saying misogyny is the hatred of, contempt for or prejudice against women, actually, which bit are we talking about? The women bit or the hatred, contempt and prejudice? If it's those three things, then she should be breaking the law for the hatred she is to anyone who went to school. Now, we've spoken before, and I went to a school once labelled a demonised depository for social waste. That was the headline. When I was at school, I was called social waste. And so I didn't want my girls to go to that school. They went to an amazing school. But what I learned from there, certainly I didn't come from Eton, I didn't come from a great school. You know, spent my early years in a caravan. I shared a bed with two brothers till I was 11 and a bedroom till I left home. So when she says that about people who go to private schools, it says to me she has zero understanding, lots of prejudice against those people. So what she ought to do is look at what hatred is and look at what hate crime is. And actually, if we're going to start to criminalise hatred, then that woman would be one of the first people in prison.
Wow, he's not pulling his punches tonight. What do you think about this idea of misogyny being a hate crime? Have you suffered at the hands of misogyny?
No, I don't think so. I think if we want an even playing field... I mean, why shouldn't misandry then be a hate crime as well? We're going to label everything... My worry is that we label everything that makes hurty feelings a hate crime. And I think we then dilute what are serious hate crimes. I'm fascinated, though. I can't answer your question because I'm fascinated by Angela Rayner saying she's going to stop sexual harassment before it starts. Well, where are we going with that? Are we going to start accusing people of sexual harassment before they've even I mean, of course sexual harassment is wrong, but what's her plan there?
You have to wonder, don't you? Because, I mean, would it be flirtation in the office?
Would it be flirtation, someone making you feel uncomfortable, someone, I don't know, are we going to go down the route of standing too close? Are we going to start measuring people again and two-metre rule all over again?
The Tom Cruise rule.
We just don't like someone?
The Tom Cruise rule, which is to not make eye contact with somebody of the opposite sex in the office, which, by the way, I think is a policy on some Netflix productions now, where the crew have been told not to make eye contact with the opposite sex.
Well, I think that we need to start to look at relations between men and women, because Lewis made a really good point. We're not dealing with the problem at all. And I think we are creating an atmosphere when women and men in a workplace, on a film set, are not allowed to look at each other, to make eye contact. That's when you really have to worry about relations between the sexes, between the genders.
Lewis, who decides what misogyny is? I mean, do you think a comedian could be accused of a hate crime for doing a mother-in-law joke?
Maybe it's...
And isn't that the risk?
Well, I think the thing is, what we're trying to regulate at the moment is regulating people to be good people. It's really hard to kind of write a list of, like, you do all this and then you're a good person. We all have to interact. Sometimes people might make an off-collared comment. But if we want to take this seriously, then we have to be able to weed out those... Look, that's just banter. That is just how people interact with... Nah. You don't touch her. You don't do that.
Of course you don't touch people unwanted.
So I think we have to just make sure that there is a common sense line, maybe.
But hate crime is different. We're categorising things as hate crimes. Of course we know what sexual harassment is. Of course we know that you don't touch, you don't, unwanted sexual advances, all of that.
we have laws around that already.
We have laws around that. But when you start to label things that make... That you don't like, or that you think that that's hatred towards women, no, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just offensive language towards another human being. As you say, a joke about a mother-in-law.
I think
when that becomes a crime, we're in a real situation.
You run businesses. How do you feel about having to follow rules about hate crimes and misogyny?
Well, Emma makes a good point that people know. When we get to a point where people are so scared, teachers are scared to teach in the way they know they need to teach, in case they say something wrong or accidentally point out one child and so police are scared to police. I don't think anyone goes to work not wanting to do those things. And this kind of signpost politics that is really about winning votes or trying to win over a certain part of the population, because it will never be able to be easily sorted, because the definition is too vague to know, was it an intent? Was it just a conversation?
I think a lot of misogyny and the incel, that kind of movement, comes from these weird rules whereby men feel angry towards women or women feel angry towards men because normal human behaviour is suddenly labelled as criminal. And I think that we just need to get back to basics and treat people with respect, and improve the relations between men and women and between young girls and young boys and all the way up.
Does this give us a flavour of what life would be like under a Labour government, where the state determines everything that comes out of your mouth?
And yet Keir Starmer struggled to say what was a man and what was a woman.
Yeah.
It just seems so ironic.
In its own way, it's a hate crime, isn't it? Well, look, let's move on now to a slightly lighter story, because a woman has given up on her search for Prince Charming and spent £10,000 on marrying herself. In a lavish ceremony, the lucky bride/groom vowed to love and cherish herself and be her own knight in shining armour. So, could marrying yourself be the key to happiness? Should more of us do it? Is it time to celebrate being single? Anyone single here?
No.
No, all happily ensconced?
I am, but I don't feel single with a young child. You don't feel single.
You're married to your son. But would you marry yourself? What do you think? Well, no, I'll rephrase that. Would you walk yourself down the aisle?
You're talking to a woman who's been engaged 5 times, and I've never made the ultimate mistake. I've had a nice few rings passing through my hands, and I've never
Have they been long engagements?
The ultimate. Yeah, I mean, they've been long, serious engagements. They've been proper engagements, but I've never quite. I'm good at leaving. I've never quite been able to see myself at the age of 90 with that man. Still with that man.
Was that it? You were projecting forward. You were happy at the time, but you're thinking, I'm not in this for the long haul.
Or I wasn't happy at the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I've been married 30 years. We've been together 35 years. I want to die with that woman. You know, does she drive me crazy, though? Absolutely. It isn't about finding the person who you never have arguments with. And maybe this lady who's married herself is going to be happy with herself for the rest of her life. What's she going to do if she meets someone who she falls in love with? Is she going to divorce herself as well? Can she legally marry them, or is she legally married now so she can't marry someone else until she's divorced?
And is it
going to be bigamy?
Well, too much. But listen, I mean, this is an interesting one. Is it a message of self-love, Lewis?
I think so, and I think reading the story, she's kind of taken it a bit tongue-in-cheek. She wanted a big wedding. She couldn't find a man. She was like, I'm having the big wedding anyway. So good for her. I think it's great. I actually think we'll probably see more of this going on. People are really struggling to settle down, and people are then all of a sudden saying, you know what, forget it, I'm better off by myself. So.
Isn't it just called a party, though? If
No,
you have
a wedding.
I know, but
got a dress on,
£10,000 on a party.
She got a ring, she had a hen do, she did the whole lot. She had a stag do as well.
Sounds a bit attention-seeking to me.
She spent 10 grand on it.
She had a hen do and a stag do.
You can't get married for 10 grand these days easily.
And when she threw the bouquet, did she catch it herself, do you think?
She didn't throw a bouquet. I think she threw fake little champagne bottles or something like that.
Right. Well, we wish her and herself every happiness together. Now, coming up, looking forward to this, in my Take at 10, the Irish Premier Leah Varadkar says that Britain is disengaging from the world. I'll be putting this EU stooge right and disengaging from his absolute nonsense. You won't want to miss my Take at 10 in just 15 minutes' time. But my Mark Meets guest has gained thousands of fans online by travelling to the most dangerous places in the world. He's even met the Taliban and lived to tell the story. He's next.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7pm.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Well, Labour have said they will make misogyny or extreme sexism a hate crime, announced by Angela Rayner today at a Women in Labour conference. Of course, the Labour conference starts tomorrow. This from Peter, who says, "Hi, Mark, I send lots of jokes on WhatsApp. Someone's always the butt of those jokes. I don't discriminate. I make jokes about everyone and everything. And I send them to anyone and everyone. Does this mean a sense of humour is now illegal? Sarcasm and satire, are they a hate crime? Will it be illegal to smile or laugh?" Well, Peter, I fear we're headed that way with that level of authoritarianism. Yvonne says it's laughable from Angela Rayner, who talked about her ginger growler and crossing her legs to distract the opposite sex. She needs to start with herself. This from Anonymous. Rayner wants to make misogyny a hate crime. What if after the event the perpetrator becomes a woman? And last but not least, Noel says, "Hi Mark, where will Muslim men stand under Angela Rayner's new laws? Religious dispensation?" Keep those emails coming, mark@gbnews.com. It's time now for this. Yes, it's time for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz and beyond. Tonight, a bold adventurer who has become an internet sensation after visiting the most dangerous places in the world, including Russian-controlled Kherson in the Ukraine, gang-controlled favelas in Brazil, and Saddam Hussein's palace in Iraq. He also came face-to-face with the Taliban and survived. His courage, or recklessness, depending on your point of view, has won him an army of fans on YouTube. And the only question remains, where's he going next? Callum Mills, who's known online as Callum Abroad, joins us now. Callum, great to have you on the show. You've got a strange taste in holidays. What's wrong with a week in Ibiza?
Yeah, it's a little bit more obscure places that I go to, but I think sometimes Ibiza can be a little bit more dangerous.
Well, that's it. You've obviously got an appetite for peril. Where did this interest in dangerous locations come from?
Well, the places that I go to, such as Somalia, Pakistan, Israel, Palestine, these are places that I've grown up seeing on the news for all the wrong reasons. So I thought it was good to actually go there and see what it's really like and see it for myself.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me about your encounter with the Taliban.
So I was in Afghanistan a few weeks ago. I initially crossed the border of Pakistan, and I was met with two Taliban members. One had a white headband and one had a red headband. And I soon found out that the ones with the red headbands, the Taliban basically told me that they were suicide bombers. So that was my first encounter with the Taliban. As you can imagine, it was a little bit daunting. I was detained several times in Afghanistan, but the Taliban were actually pretty friendly, if I'm being honest with you, offering me tea and asking if I had any problems and telling me that I'm safe in Afghanistan.
Of course, we know that they've committed terrible atrocities and likely continue to do so. Did you sense that you were around people that could do very bad things? Did they have that vibe?
They weren't giving me that vibe. I mean, I understand the previous what's went on in Afghanistan previously, but having a little chat with the Taliban, they told me that things are different now. Now, I'm not saying that's true. I'm not saying they have changed a new leaf, but they did tell me that things are different and the Taliban have now changed. How true that is, I'm not sure, but I didn't personally feel in any danger with them. They told me that they were happy for tourists to come to Afghanistan. I even asked them if it was possible for ex-soldiers to go and visit Afghanistan now that the war's finished, and they told me yes, they didn't have a problem with it. Again, how true that is, I'm not too sure, but yeah, I didn't feel any danger at all.
Do you not fear that you were a victim of propaganda there or a bit of brainwashing for them, given their record?
Well, that's the thing. So, I mean, I go there with an open mind, and it's easy to say treat others how they treat you, but I understand what's going on in Afghanistan. But I spoke to young Taliban members, and they told me that they joined the Taliban simply because they were getting $100 a month, and they disagree with women not being able to get educated. They feel that their sisters and mothers and stuff should get an education. They just didn't want to speak out. So this was some young, new Taliban members who said they simply joined because they get $100 a month.
Extraordinary. What about those murderous gangs in the favelas of Brazil and Colombia?
Yeah, well, I went to Rio, and it's like anything, to get the full fabric of society, I think you have to speak to everybody. And the favelas were... It was interesting because someone tried to rob me in Copacabana Beach, but when I went into the favelas, I felt more safe. It's very strange.
Now, obviously, North Korea and China would be tempting for the future. Is there anywhere you wouldn't go?
Anywhere I wouldn't go? London? No, I'm joking.
Yeah, you're a wise man. Listen, what do your family, your loved ones think of these trips? They must be worried sick.
Yeah, initially they were a little bit worried, but now they watch the YouTube videos, and there has been times when I've told them that I'm going to Dubai for a holiday, but in fact I went to Somalia.
Yeah, what about your travel insurance? How expensive is that?
I don't have travel insurance. That might sound crazy, but I don't have travel insurance.
No, it doesn't surprise me. I've got to say, you've got a massive following on YouTube now, haven't you? All my viewers have got to do, they just go to YouTube and search Callum Abroad, Callum with 2 L's. Is that right?
Callum, yeah, Callum Abroad on YouTube and also Twitter. It's now came to on Twitter, my followers can now vote each month on the destinations that I go to. So I sometimes blame my followers for the places that I go to. They recently voted for Somalia, and they voted next for Mexico, Sinaloa.
Well, more power to you, Callum. The videos are hugely entertaining, so I'd urge my viewers to go and take a look. And good luck with your next trip, and just stay safe, yeah?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
My thanks to Callum Abroad. Check him out online. Quite a character. What a daredevil. So much more to come. In the 10 o'clock hour, we will be dealing with tomorrow's papers. And in my take at 10, the Irish Premier, Leo Varadkar, says Britain is disengaging from the world. Well, I'm disengaging from his nonsense. That's my take at 10. You won't want to miss it. So much more to get through. Don't forget the email is mark@gbnews.com. A busy hour to come. Don't go anywhere.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Well, coming up, I'll be dealing with Leo Varadkar in my take at 10, who thinks that Britain has decoupled from the world. I'll be dealing with him in no uncertain terms, but lots of emails coming in thick and fast. Angela Rayner has kicked off the Labour Party conference with a speech in which she has said that Labour will make misogyny or extreme sexism a hate crime. Well, this from, let's have a look, Shawnee, who says, "Hi, Mark, is this not the same woman that called all Tories scum? I take it that is not a hate crime." Trevor says one reason never to vote Labour is Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves hate men. Peter says, "Hi, Mark, the problem is that the police will take this ball and run with it. Before long, you'll be arrested if you say women's football isn't as good as men's." There you go. I tell you what, Spurs were good today, though. Lots more to come. It's 10 o'clock. On TV, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, the Irish Premier Leo Varadkar says Britain is disengaging from the world. I'll be putting this EU stooge right and disengaging from his absolute nonsense. As Donald Trump roars ahead of Joe Biden in the polls, is a Trump presidency now inevitable? Plus, Prince Andrew won't budge from the Royal Lodge, escalating his Cold War with King Charles. We'll get reaction from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from my top pundits. So, a packed show, lots to get through. I'll be dealing with the Irish Premier, who thinks this country has decoupled from the world. Well, he has decoupled from common sense. I'll deal with him in just a couple of minutes. First, the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark, and good evening. Our top story tonight. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will take mighty vengeance against the terrorist organisation Hamas after more than 200 Israelis were killed and 1,100 injured due to a surprise attack. Nearly 200 Palestinians have also subsequently died after Hamas fired thousands of rockets and gunmen crossed the border. Local news reported Israeli civilians in border towns barricading themselves into their homes and pleading for help. Hamas says Israeli captives are being held in secure places, including tunnels. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says the UK will not tolerate terrorism.
The UK completely condemns these terrorist acts against Israel, and we support Israel's right to self-defense. And of course, we will be working closely with the Israeli government. We're already in contact with them and will continue to do so, both to protect British nationals in Israel and to try and bring peace as quickly as possible.
Well, dozens of Hamas terrorists have been stopped by Israeli naval personnel, according to Israel's defence forces. A warning for those watching on TV, you may find the following footage distressing. Earlier this morning, the IDF pursued dozens of terrorists along the southern maritime area as they tried to enter Israeli territory via the water. Soldiers opened fire on the militants, successfully destroying 4 vessels. Hamas terrorists were also stopped as they tried to cross into Israel along the southern border. Back here, a significant quantity of what is thought to be cocaine has been discovered off the coast of Dorset and Hampshire. The National Crime Agency is investigating after a fisherman discovered holdalls containing hundreds of kilos of powder in the sea off Purbeck, more washed up on a beach on the Isle of Wight. The NCA say the Class A drugs would have originated in South America. They're urging the public to report the discovery of any similar packages to their local police force. 260 suspected rapists have been labelled as females by police over the last 4 years. That's according to data from the CPS, which was obtained by the Daily Telegraph. The classification comes despite the Home Secretary urging police not to label rape suspects as women, as by law it can only be committed by a biological male. The figures show a further 209 suspects were recorded with sex unknown. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now let's get back to Mark.
Nice to have you with us tonight, Ray. We'll see you in an hour. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Happy Saturday, one and all. Big news stateside as Donald Trump roars ahead of Joe Biden in the polls. Is a Trump presidency now inevitable? Plus, Prince Andrew will not budge from the Royal Lodge mansion, escalating his Cold War with King Charles. We'll get reaction from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. Broadcaster and journalist Emma Wolfe, podcaster and commentator Lewis Oakley, an entrepreneur and former Brexit Party candidate, a brand new star on Mark Dolan tonight, Mike Green. Plus, they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day. A packed hour, and those papers are coming. But first, my take at 10. With friends like these, who needs enemies? The Prime Minister of Ireland, Leo Varadkar, has accused Britain of disengaging from the world. Take a listen.
It does bother me to see the United Kingdom disengaging from the world, whether it's reducing its budget for international aid, whether it's leaving the European Union, and now even talking about withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights. That's not the Britain I know.
Ouch. These comments come ahead of a meeting with Rishi Sunak, which now looks set to be frostier than a pack of jumbo king prawns from Iceland. And there's something fishy about this statement. It feels political. In my view, it's yet another Brexit punishment beating from an EU overlord. I'll say one thing about Varadkar. He's a smart guy, and he softened his position during the Brexit negotiations with Boris Johnson, and he helped to get a deal across the line. Fair play. But that's as far as it goes. As a man of Irish heritage myself, I'm embarrassed by his latest comments. Let's talk about this Britain that's disengaging from the world, shall we? Signing a free trade deal with the CPTPP, a global trading bloc larger than the entirety of the EU. Is that disengaging from the world? Is doing business with Australia, Canada, Japan, Mexico, Singapore and New Zealand disengaging from the world? Is a deal with the United States and Australia to build nuclear submarines disengaging? What about the UK signing a fighter jet deal with Japan? The Hiroshima Accord, security assurances for Finland and Sweden. Is this disengaging from the world? Is Britain's leadership and huge financial support for Ukraine, £5 billion so far, is that disengaging from the world? How many billions have Dublin contributed to the war effort against Russia, I wonder? What's happening with Varadkar is that he's behaving like a jilted lover, because this country's great crime was leaving a political bloc and regaining our national sovereignty. His country, Ireland, is sadly so far down the EU rabbit hole, it will never be free. But we are free, and Varadkar hates it. The big man cites Brexit as another example of our disengagement from the world. neglecting to mention the comprehensive free trade deal that we have with the EU itself. And here's an annoying fact that doesn't fit the narrative. Exports to the EU from the UK are now at a record high. Doesn't sound very disengaged to me. The UK is a European linchpin in NATO. We've opened our arms to the people of Hong Kong, 150,000 and counting, following China's reclaiming of that territory. What about Britain's bold leadership during the evacuation of Afghanistan, in which British troops rescued many fleeing the Taliban, including Irish citizens? Is that disengaging from the world? I could go on. Actually, I will. Close to 100 trade deals in the offing, with an agreement with India and its population of 1 billion people likely to be signed by Christmas. What about our diplomatic, defence and economic ties with the Commonwealth? 56 independent countries around the world. Is that, disengaging? But oh no, we've got to take lectures from the Premier of a country which is a glorified tax haven, which is in the grip of woke ideology, which inflicted dreadful COVID authoritarianism on its own people, and which does whatever it's told by its real leaders in Brussels. Was it Ireland that armed Kyiv before the Ukrainian war started? Or was that, Brexit Britain? I wonder. Britain has never been more engaged with the world, not despite of Brexit, but because of it. It's only Leo Varadkar, this EU stooge, who's disengaged, and that's from reality. Your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.com. Leo Varadkar would argue that Britain has left the European Union, that we've cut foreign aid, that we're threatening to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. He would argue those are clear evidential proofs that Britain is disengaging from the world community. That's his view, that's not mine. What do you think? Mark at gbnews.com, as I say, is the email. Let's get reaction from my top pundits, broadcaster and journalist Emma Wolfe, entrepreneur and former Brexit Party candidate Mike Green, and top podcaster and commentator Lewis Oakley. Mike, is Britain disengaging from the world?
Do you know, what I thought as you were talking there, Mark, is you had lots of facts. What Leo gave us was an opinion. And I love the saying, we're past the watershed, opinions are like a-holes and most of them are full of poo. And I think all he gave us was an opinion. You gave us the facts. Now, all I look at is, for 40 nearly years, we were a net contributor to the EU. Ireland was a net recipient, and I think he's a bit bitter that he's not getting perhaps the proceeds that he has enjoyed in the past.
Yeah, what do you think about this, Lewis? I think it's quite a slur on this country. I think global Britain is very present in the world.
I get that. I mean, Leo certainly rattled you. I wasn't that rattled. I think part of Brexit is that we disengage from the bits we don't want to be involved in and then re-engage in the bits that we do want to be involved in. So I think it's fine. As you say, you put forward some really great facts there. I mean, Brexit is still in a bit of an evolution phase. I still think we really don't know how it's going to all turn out for us. If you're a small business, you're probably not feeling that enthusiastic about it. But you know what? He's entitled to his free speech, and we'll have to prove him wrong.
But do you not think, Lewis, that Britain is now more global since Brexit, not less?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a good argument for that we're now trading with the world, that we've got partnerships with the rest of the world, and I think that is definitely a good thing and a bit of a benefit of Brexit.
Emma, this sounds to me like another punishment beating for leaving the bloc.
Yeah, look, obviously Brexit felt like a threat to many EU leaders, and Varadkar's just bitter, isn't he? He's absolutely bitter. But it's absolute nonsense. As you've pointed out, Mark, we're deeply engaged with the rest of the world, not only all those free trade deals. Look, we're leading the way in in supporting Ukraine and standing up to murderous bullies like Putin. And the inconvenient truth for Varadkar is that, people want to come to this country in thousands, millions every year. We're a wonderful, beautiful country to visit. People want to come here. We are deeply engaged with the rest of the world. Whether or not we're part of the EU is completely irrelevant.
Well, indeed. But, Emma, I think we've got years of this to come, which is the anti-Britain narrative. It doesn't match reality,
Of course we have, because they're threatened by the fact that we left.
Of course. The problem we've got, though, Emma, is that it's not just foreign leaders like Leo Varadkar, but there are plenty on our own shores who seize upon moments like that from
Ramonas, yes, and the Ramonas won't stop moaning, and they won't accept a democratic result, and they won't go away.
Mike, have you had enough of people talking the country
They should
down,
go to Ireland.
Whether it's the leader of Ireland or those on our own shores?
Yeah, I think one of the most hurtful things when Brexit was happening, and I shamelessly and happily was a Brexiteer, but it was never about exclusion, and the Remainers very successfully made Brexit about prejudice, about hate, about exclusion. And actually, your conversation with Lewis, we were trying to extract ourselves from Europe so we could better engage with the world. And it used to frustrate me as an employer that it was much harder for me to employ someone who might be much more qualified and appropriate from Canada, from Australia, from India, because I had to trade with this little European old-school Thai group. And actually, those countries I mentioned were part of the Commonwealth with whom we've had a relationship for decades longer. So for most Brexiteers, it was about an openness to deal with, trade with, employ people from all over the world.
Indeed. Briefly, Lewis, though, does Varadkar have a point that if we leave the ECHR, that is us turning our backs on an important piece of legislation, and therefore we would be an outlier globally?
Oh, it's a really tricky one because we helped put the thing together. So I don't think all of our rights are going to go out of the window if we change it, if we choose to. But I think that it unsettles a lot of people both here and abroad for us to leave. And we are a key player in the world. So whatever we do does have those kind of ripple effects. So I don't think people should worry too much that, all of our rights are going to go out of the window. But at the same time, people have felt that kept them safe. So it's a really tricky one to kind of say which way it's going to go.
What do you think? Has Leo Varadkar got a point that Britain has disengaged with the world? That's the topic of one of our text polls. We'll reveal all shortly. And coming up, as Donald Trump roars ahead of Joe Biden in the polls, is a Trump presidency now inevitable? Plus, Prince Andrew will not budge from the Royal Lodge mansion, escalating his Cold War with King Charles. We'll get reaction from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Plus, the paper's on the way. See you in 2.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians
to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's time now for US News with the Queen of American showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Kinsey, great to have you back on the show. Joe Biden, has he reacted to the carnage playing out in Israel as we speak?
Yes, sir, he did. He's spoken actually at a very brief press conference where he didn't take any questions, but he stressed that we do side with Israel and that we're going to do everything in our power to help them. Of course, as Americans, we're sitting there wondering, what can we physically do at this point when we've done so much for Ukraine? But it was interesting, and something that people are talking about, even some of the mainstream media, is the U.S. Office of Palestine Affairs. They tweeted and then deleted a message urging all sides to refrain from violence and retaliatory attacks. Now, the State Department stresses that the tweet was deleted because it was not approved. But my goodness, it makes our country look so unorganized, right? That should not have ever gone out to begin with.
Absolutely right. They should speak with one voice, particularly given the fact that America is the world's predominant economic and military superpower and Israel's main strategic ally. Now, a new poll says that Donald Trump would beat Joe Biden in a presidential race. Do you think that a likelihood of a Trump return to the White House is growing by the day, Kinsey?
That's a tough question, but I do feel like his entire campaign is all of this legal drama. I mean, it's become, a war cry, right? But it's the Marquette, I believe it's the Marquette Law School survey saying that people that are, undecided whether or not they're going to vote or not, say that 62% say they would if they do vote, or they're going to vote for Trump. 37, I believe, said they were going to vote for Biden. But they see Trump's strengths in, the economy, in foreign affairs, in immigration. But I think that the reason they're undecided at this point in time is because of his legal woes. They're kind of trying to sit back and see what happens, what comes to fruition. They're not necessarily confident that all of this stuff is going to be done by the time we're expected to put our ballots in.
Indeed. I mean, is this an existential battle for Donald Trump? Is his only hope of staying out of jail becoming president?
Wow, Mark, you're getting me good today with these questions. I would hope not. I mean, I really would hope not. But I do think that every time a blue state hits Trump with something nefarious, it causes his supporters to rise. And, I know people that every time something happens, they're donating to his campaign. And people are really passionate about this man. And I do believe that I think it's the idea of him being a maverick. I think it's the idea of him really challenging the system that impresses people. And when the system keeps trying to shut him down, it just elevates him even more.
Indeed so. Can we talk about Prince Andrew, who's rather comfortable in his Royal Lodge accommodation? What's happening there? It seems like the Cold War between Prince Andrew and King Charles is brewing.
Mark, this has been a story we've been talking about for months, maybe even a year at this point in time. It was reported that King Charles wanted to evict Prince Andrew, wanted him to head over to Frogmore Cottage and enjoy that space. So perhaps inevitably the Waleses could move into Royal Lodge. According to The Sun, Prince Andrew met with King Charles at Balmoral and stressed, kind of put himself out there and said, this is why I don't want to leave. The Sun says that Prince Andrew has invested over £200,000 in renovations to Royal Lodge at this point in time. And that was enough to convince King Charles to let him spend some more time there. So apparently he is safe. He can put the moving boxes away. He's no longer the squatting spare. He's comfortable where he is, and he's going to stay there.
There you go. He is not moving for love nor money. What about his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson? She's made headlines this week.
Yeah, don't forget it's his roommate. His roommate and ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson. She is looking for a talk show here in the States. And all I would say is, haven't we suffered enough? Okay.
Yeah.
But she has been making meetings because she would like to have a sit-down talk show in the States, a la Oprah, a la Drew Barrymore, who's become really successful over here. Mark, I think people would actually watch this. Fergie is very engaging. She's got a great sense of humor, and she has a lot of really good contacts.
For sure, I've always been a big fan. I think she's a real character, and bless her for putting up with Prince Andrew and continuing to cohabit with him. I mean, it was a great love affair, but it just didn't quite work out for the couple. Is there any hope that they could ever reconcile or remarry?
Yeah, I would hope so. Would that not be the ultimate dream? I would think that would be very romantic. That's a Lifetime movie that I would watch on repeat, Mark. It's the idea. Are they friends with benefits? This question lives rent-free in my head 365 days a year. I'm curious.
If they were to remarry, might that rehabilitate the image of Prince Andrew?
I think so. Don't you? Don't you think that would shake things up? I do too. I think that we would get all lost in that storyline again. And, I saw the poll results on Twitter. I understand a lot of people do want Prince Andrew to move out of Royal Lodge. But at the end of the day, I feel like the Queen would be happy with where he's at right now. And I feel like she left him there on purpose. So I'm kind of okay with him staying there.
Too right. Can we talk about the Sussexes now? Harry and Meghan return to New York City following their near-catastrophic collision.
Isn't this interesting? And after Prince William had such a successful visit here, Americans went crazy for Prince William. But this is the first time the Sussexes are back in NYC after that car chase, after Meghan accepted her award for her podcast that no longer exists. And they're doing an Archwell in-person event on Tuesday where they're going to be discussing, people's digital footprint, children's digital footprints, and how parents can protect their kids online.
Oh, my goodness gracious me. Well, as always, they've made headlines. I mean, do we feel, because you look at the Sussexes on a sort of day-by-day basis now, don't you? How's the brand looking overall following the Invictus Games, for example?
Yeah, no, it's not necessary. I feel like Meghan hobnobbing with all of these celebrities made a bigger impact than Prince William's Prince Harry's Invictus Games. I feel like people were more glued to Meghan at the Beyonce concert, more glued to this idea of her she went to the Beyonce concert twice. I don't think that people are impressed by them. They feel, at this point in time, I still feel like there is an element of shallowness that surrounds that brand, and they really need to shake that off.
Brilliant stuff. We never want to shake you off, Kinsey. We'll see you in a week's time. My thanks to the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Do check out her brilliant podcast, To Die For Daily, which is all about royal stories, and indeed her website of the same name. Coming up, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from my top pundits. Plus, they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day. And in response to my take at 10, we've been asking you, the great British public, is the Irish Premier Leo Varadkar right that Britain is disengaging from the world? The results are in. I shall reveal all next.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now, we conducted an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll. We've been asking, is the Irish Premier Leo Varadkar right that Britain is disengaging from the world? That was the topic of my big opinion at 10 o'clock. But the results are in. And yes, 21.9% say Britain has disengaged from the world, but a massive stonking majority, 78.1%, say no, we are very much global Britain. Well, it is 10:30, so it's time now for the front pages. And we start with the Independent newspaper. Hamas take up to 50 hostages as Israel declares we are at war. Moving on to the Mail on Sunday now. War on Israel, don't kill me. The petrified plea of Noah, aged 25, kidnapped from a peace festival by Hamas terrorists. One of 60 Israelis, including children, mothers and old women, snatched in a murderous invasion that left the world appalled and the Middle East on the brink of all-out war. Let's have a look now at the Sunday Express. Human shield horror. Hamas terrorists kidnap grandmas and children as hundreds slaughtered in brutal attack on Israel. The Telegraph, Hamas terrorists butcher civilians as stunned Israel suffers what they're calling a 9/11 moment. The Sunday Times, hostages dragged from homes in Israel as families flee slaughter. Hundreds die, say the Observer, and hostages held as Hamas assault shocks Israel. Sun on Sunday now. A showbiz story. BGT acts left me suicidal. David Walliams in the High Court suing ITV after he was fired by Britain's Got Talent. And let's have a look at the Sunday Mirror. This morning, stars reunited. Holly and Phil heel rift over kidnap horror. And I think we'll just put the Daily Star Sunday to one side, if you don't mind, Alistair, because it's now time to get more on this devastating set of developments in Israel with the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simons, who is also the author of a brand new book about attitudes to Israel called Israelophobia. Jake, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, your reaction to the appalling violence that we've seen meted out to Israeli citizens in the last 24 hours.
Well, Mark, like many other people, when I first woke up this morning and saw my phone lighting up with this news, my initial reaction was of disbelief, almost like it could be some, poor taste joke. But as the day wore on and more news came to light, a sense of real thickness and disgust came across me, which, to be honest, is still pervading me to this moment. This is an unprecedented set of events. The ease with which the Gaza murderers were able to approach the border and enter Israel and massacre, abuse and take hostage so many civilians is really just unprecedented in Israel's history. This is the biggest attack on civilians that Israel has ever experienced, and taking place on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, which is probably as close as Israel has ever come to total destruction. It really is very, very sobering and disturbing indeed.
Indeed, it's an appalling tragedy. This attack looks to have been unexpected. Hamas there perhaps catching the security services unawares. Now, Hamas are recognised by the British government, Jake, as a terrorist organisation. As you said, one of the most audacious moves by the group in many years. Israel have retaliated. How do you see this awful conflict playing out?
Well, with any conflict involving Israel, there are two wars that take place. The first is the war in the real world, where the Israeli Defense Forces are going to be pitted against Hamas militants and other associated Gaza terrorists as well. And we're all, looking and praying at the northern border, hoping that Hezbollah don't get involved, creating another front for Israel to contend with as well. So that's the first war. The second war takes place in the realm of public opinion, on Twitter, on social media, and on broadcasters such as this one, where people, often useful idiots of Islamists on the left, begin to argue and blame Israel for this unprovoked attack, use talking points and lies and misinformation to undermine the Jewish state's right to defend itself and present Israel as the attacker when it's clearly been caught unawares by this surprise assault. Now, this sort of propaganda is one of the features of modern warfare when it comes to Israel, at least. And it's one that is really as hotly contested as the real war itself.
Well, indeed so. Plenty of high-profile commentators in the media in this country seemingly sympathetic to Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation.
It's truly unbelievable. I mean, people are blaming the occupation, regardless of the fact that Israel withdrew unilaterally from Gaza in 2005. There is no occupation in Gaza at all by any stretch of the imagination. These people are speaking up in support and in defense of a terrorist group that will break into Israeli civilian population centers, will murder grandmothers, will open fire on civilian families huddling in their bomb shelters, will drag off women, children, families into Gaza as hostages, and will summarily execute people as they go through Israeli streets. These are not people who are friends of anybody, or should be friends of anybody in the West. And yet the perversity of identity politics and the hard left are such that they will support the most brutal murderers and butchers and terrorist fanatics because they perceive them as being the underdogs in some sort of socialist struggle in the culture wars. It really is absolutely sickening. People in Britain and around the West have got to get back in touch with the values that unite us and the Israelis, which are the values of free speech, democracy, tolerance of minorities, and general sort of freedom of expression, and stand against this brutal savagery that we're seeing taking place astonishingly in 2023.
Well, indeed. Your book is called Israelophobia, and it's very much about the hatred of Jewish people around the world, and that's the sort of awful thing that motivates these attacks. And actually, you've followed the book up with an article in tomorrow's Telegraph on a similar theme. And in your column, you argue that the atrocities in Israel were not resistance by freedom fighters, but an eruption of what you call the oldest hatred. We need to call it out: anti-Semitic butchery.
That's right. I mean, in my book, I make clear that in the Middle Ages, anti-Semitism really was motivated by religion. People hated Jews because they were the Christ killers. If you fast forward to the 20th century, Jews were hated on a racial basis. They were seen as a subhuman breed that needed to be exterminated because they were malevolent. Whereas today, really, anti-Semitism takes the form of politics. It's a hatred of Jews for their national home, for their homeland, for their political identity. And that really is the latest prism through which anti-Semitism is filtered. So whereas, in the past, people talked about hating Jews or standing against Jews, now they just exchange the word Jew for Zionist, and that becomes a sort of legitimate expression of the oldest hatred in the 21st century. And I think that it's important to recognize that that is what is animating these Hamas terrorists. And that is what really is animating their cheerleaders and supporters in the West, who might pose as social justice warriors, but really this sort of social justice language is simply the latest mask that the ugly face of anti-Semitism is assuming in order to try to gain followers in the West. So, yeah, this is the argument that I'm making in the book, and it's borne out in vivid, horrific detail on our screens all day today, and I suspect over the next few days and couple of weeks.
Indeed, nothing justifies this horrific attack. What would you say, though, to critics of Israel's treatment of the Palestinian people?
Well, look, I mean, if you're going to criticize Israel reasonably without resorting to lies, untruths, and misinformation, bigotry, and prejudice, then good luck to you. I mean, there's nowhere so much criticism of Israel as within Israel itself. My problem really is when lies, misinformation, and disproportionality hijack the debate, and that is the hallmark of Israelophobia, or the latest form of anti-Semitism. For example, if you criticize Israel of being a genocidal state, that's quite common. The Palestinian population increased 5-fold since Israel's establishment. Pretty bad genocide. If you criticize it for being a white supremacist state, that's difficult because more Israelis are non-white than are white. If you criticize it for being a colonial state, another great sin of the social justice movement, that's difficult historically because Israel historically is a post-colonial state arising from the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the withdrawal of the British Mandate, and so on and so forth. All of these are lies. And when people articulate them as means of trying to bring down the Jewish state, that's a hallmark of Israelophobia. But reasonable fact-based criticism, opposing, the violence of Israeli extremists on the West Bank, for example, I oppose that. I criticize that. That's perfectly reasonable to criticize that, or settlement policy or whatever. That's totally legitimate and fine. What I'm talking about is the anti-Semitism that comes through in this new form of Israelophobia.
Jake Wallace-Simons, thank you so much for joining us. Jake is the editor of the Jewish Chronicle and the author of Israelophobia, which is out now. And do check out his piece for tomorrow's Telegraph, which is already online. Well, let's react to some of the other stories of the day in the company of Emma Wolfe, Mike Green and Lewis Oakley. And can we talk about plans by Labour to fund student grants by richer graduates? Lewis, you're probably the one panellist that's been in higher education more recently than the rest of us. Labour is exploring plans to bring back maintenance grants for poorer students by increasing the debt burden on wealthier graduates. Modelling being studied by the party envisages spending £2.3 billion a year to bring back grants by levying larger student loan interest rates on higher earners. Your reaction?
It's one of those things. How is it going to work? I do think that, you know, going to uni now is so expensive. I mean, you're never going to pay it back a lot of the time. And I do think that the argument now should be really more about not going to uni and more about going to apprenticeships and that kind of thing. On their actual plans, I don't know, because there are a lot of people that are rich on paper, and maybe and I think, you know, if you look at how student loans are calculated now, it's about how much the parents earn, but that's not to say that the parents are actually giving it to the children. So it's a really hard one to kind of work out who is rich and who is not, I think, in a lot of these situations.
I think you're absolutely right. I share your measured view on that. How about this in the Sunday Times, Mike? Labour's Greenbelt building plan. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, has pledged to review the rules on building on Greenbelt as part of a planning revolution that she claims could unlock £200 billion of investment. We think of Greenbelt as kind of these wonderful flowery meadows. It's not always the case. A lot of it is ripe for development.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we're in the year's run-up to the next election, aren't we? So they're all going to promise world peace and loving everybody. But the reality is the last government that hit a housing target was 1977. You know, each government, both of the parties, have been absolutely appalling at building. They want to blame builders. They want to tax developers. What they ought to do is look at themselves and take some responsibility for housing people. The UK, the population has increased, even in the last, since the Tories have been in power, by 5 million people, and we've only built 1.3 million homes. You know, that's without the disparate needs of the current population. It's a joke. We do need to build more houses, but just making that statement, they've been making that for 30 years, no one's delivered. 50 years, no one's delivered since 46 years ago, 1977. What makes me believe that they're going to do it next year, next 5 years? Nothing that's coming from either party.
Feels like they might be on the verge of a party conference and they're suddenly coming up with ideas, which Labour have been sadly lacking for 4 or 5 years. And, suddenly all these ideas are springing out of the woodwork.
What about this one, Emma? Sunak to end sick note culture after fears GPs are too lenient. A radical overhaul of the sick note regime is to be unveiled by the government this autumn as the centrepiece of a back-to-work drive designed to tackle Britain's ballooning welfare bill. Mel Stride, the Work and Pensions Secretary, is working on plans to shake up the regime in favour of a treat them first approach designed to reduce the number of people being routinely signed off for months at a time.
Well, there's a few things on that. Treat them first, yes, if you can get an appointment with your GP, because that's a major problem. Secondly, if people need to be treated, we need to not have millions on the waiting list. And thirdly, what about some acknowledgement of the fact that they have created a culture in which many, many, many people have spent the last 2 or 3 years either working from home or not working at all. That was a result. That was a direct result of their COVID policies and their lockdown policies, and they're putting a lot of people on furlough that didn't need to be on furlough and all of that. So that, you know, you reap what you sow. You do indeed. Well, we've talked a lot about work-shy Britain on the show. We'll, of course, return to that, no doubt, shortly. I've got more newspaper front pages to come, plus my brilliant pundits will nominate their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day. Also after this, find out why comedy star David Walliams has revealed that he's been suicidal. That's next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, more newspaper front pages are in, and let's have a look at the Daily Star Sunday for a bit of much-needed light relief on a very dark day. Star Trek exclusive. Scream me up, Scotty. Star Trek legend Sir Patrick Stewart, who played Captain Jean-Luc Picard, bought a house in Los Angeles which turned out to be haunted by a grumpy ghost. Maybe the spook was a Klingon hooked on revenge after a Vulcan death grip from Spock. There you go. Well, look, unfortunately, he's very worried about this haunted house and he's put it on the market. Also, Baywatch Britain. It's hotter than Malibu. Who knew? Welcome to global warming, hey? Has its upsides. Let's get reaction now from my fantastic pundits. I'm delighted to have with me in the studio Emma Wolfe, Mike Green and Lewis Oakley. A few other stories floating around. Sun on Sunday, Britain's Got Talent axe left me suicidal, says David Walliams. He is suing the producers of BGT. He's not happy, is he, Emma?
He's not. And I don't know the rights and wrongs of the case specifically, but in the break, we were just talking there about being caught in the middle of one of these storms, one of these media storms, various things like that. And I just think we always have to be aware that there are individuals involved in this. And, you know, I'm not supporting David Walliams in any way. I know the pressure that people can get themselves caught up in this stuff. And it's particularly dangerous and horrendous in this era of social media, when you can be literally spending days and nights without sleep, being attacked and having a pile-on from thousands, millions of anonymous people. And I can just imagine the stress that he's under.
Well, there you go. Fascinating case. Curious to see how that one plays out and what it might mean for Walliams' relationship with ITV. Well, it's time now for my pundits to nominate their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day. So, Emma, who's your hero?
Oh, my hero and my zero are interchangeable, so I'm going to say them both and ruin your game. My hero was Rishi Sunak and my zero was Mrs. Sunak, Akshata Murthy. And they're kind of interchangeable because I think the conference, it was so embarrassing and cringy what she did. The fact that it was an insult to women for her to stand up there and say, you know, he's my husband, he's my best friend, he's a great husband, he's a great father, all of that stuff. Don't do it. Don't be the spouse that is wheeled on stage at the conference telling us that your husband who's our Prime Minister, that your husband is a great father and your best friend. It's just embarrassing.
It felt quite American, didn't it?
It felt really schmaltzy, and no, but they do this. They wheel out the wife. I don't remember Philip May being wheeled out. I don't remember Dennis Thatcher being wheeled out. I don't remember Mr. Truss being wheeled out. But I always remember the wives being wheeled out, and then Rishi did it, and they wheeled. Well, apparently he didn't know it was going to happen, and la 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 la. It was really embarrassing.
But aren't you being patronising to her because it may be that she wanted to?
Well, she shouldn't have wanted to, and I didn't want to hear it.
Okay.
None of us needed to hear that.
What did you think about Lewis? What did you think about his missus popping up before the speech?
I mean, they're trying everything they can at this point. They know that they're done for at the next election. Throw the wife out. I'm surprised they didn't get the kids out as well.
I know, get the kids out. Get his old parents out from the pharmacy.
My biggest take from the whole conference was that there was more opposition from inside the party than the other side of the of Westminster. Yeah. But actually, and I can see your point, Emma, but I think it's wonderful when a partner takes the time to support their husband or wife, whichever way round, because, you know, we forget sometimes when they're a leader of a party, and I'm no Rishi fan, don't get me wrong, that there's a person there. And I think I thought she was... I didn't mind it, if I like. I thought she was eloquent.
She was very natural.
And I thought it was OK.
Well, I was impressed, I've got to say.
When did you get all sentimental? But no, I've got no problem with husbands and wives loving each other, but do it in private. He's a Prime Minister running for his job. I don't want to know whether he's a great husband and father. Of course he is. I don't want to know that he's her best friend.
Well, Lewis, I wonder whether bringing out the wife at conference, that is the political equivalent of the kitchen sink.
I think it is.
Desperation.
I thought it was.
It's worse than that.
No,
it's worse than that. It's like proposing to someone in public. It's like having a big family party and then someone proposes. Keep it in the bedroom. Keep it somewhere else.
I thought she was lovely, but there you go. It's all about opinions. Mike, your headline hero.
Well, actually, it's still the same conference. It was actually Nigel Farage. This isn't a Brexit thing, but what an amazing self-promoter. And actually, I think he was the star of the Tory conference.
He got mobbed.
Yeah, and what was interesting, the press were more interested in him. There were MPs gushing. We should beg him to come back. The MPs that weren't gushing were terrified that he was there. And it just showed to me that I don't know how they can win. I've never voted left of centre, but really, when there's that much infighting, when the star of the show is Nigel, as opposed to anyone in the Tory party, how are they going to win?
Well, I thought he was brilliant this week. Well done, Nigel. Look, the clock's against us. Lewis, your headline hero.
Forgive me, GB News viewers, but I am going for Angela Rayner. And
oh, my God.
No, I'll tell you why.
I'm leaving.
I am making time for any politician that is talking about house building at the moment, and she has talked about house building. She's talked about affordable house building. That was absent from Rishi's speech. His wife was in there, but nothing about housing. And I think that housing is the biggest problem right now. But we're spending over half of our monthly wage on either a mortgage or a rent. It's insane. And if we build more houses and bring the costs down, we can all go on holiday again.
Amen to that. OK, I need a name and a sentence for your back page zero.
Well, it's not a person. It is the public sector for allowing men a year paid leave for the male menopause.
Oh,
what a joke.
What a joke.
What a
joke. You don't ever get hot flushes, do you, Mike? And then last but not least, your back page zero.
Jeremy Hunt waging war on the work shy. Make work work. There are people that have got 2 jobs and still can't afford their bills. Sort that out before coming after the people that have just given up.
There you go. Well, listen, thank you so much for my brilliant pundits tonight. You for your company. The team behind the glass are working so hard. Dominique and the gang. We'll do it all again tomorrow at 9. Headliners is next.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry, who your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Today's weather was a contrast from north to south, and that will be continuing into Sunday as well. High pressure is situated closer towards southern areas of the UK, allowing things to be relatively settled and also importing some rather warm air. But it's this trailing frontal system across areas of Scotland that is continuing to bring outbreaks of heavy and persistent rain. An amber warning is still in force until the early hours of Sunday morning. Do continue to take care if you are travelling here, as there will be further disruption at times. Elsewhere, it will be a relatively mild night underneath all the clouds. Temperatures generally around 12 to 14 degrees Celsius, might drop into single figures in some valleys and sheltered areas. The rain across Scotland will spread from the Outer Hebrides, then into parts of the Highlands, Aberdeenshire, Moray, over towards the Northern Isles a little later on in the day. It will be quite cloudy to start off Sunday across eastern areas of England, but a few brighter spells developing later on. And once the mist clears across southern areas of England and Wales as well, we will see some sunshine, and temperatures in that sunshine will climb towards 24 degrees Celsius, notably above where we should be for the time of year. Looking forward to Monday then, and it will be a relatively cloudy picture, particularly across western areas where we'll see some cloud pushing in across coastal areas, might make its way further inland as well, providing some drizzly outbreaks at times. Best of the sunshine further towards the south and east, where again it will be quite warm for the time of year. Temperatures there will be on the way down as we head throughout the next week, with a rain band moving in as well. Bye-bye.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with